Unit 1, Internet Addiction Disorder. Part 2, Listen Now. Text 1. Students today learn how to use computers as early as age 5 or 6. They are also spending more time online, surfing the web, emailing, twittering, playing games, using Facebook, etc. Rumor has it that some even use the internet to research term papers. The question I'd like you to consider is, are people spending too much time on their computers? Some doctors, believe that people can misuse the internet, the same way people drink too much or gamble too much. They call this problem Internet Addiction Disorder, or IAD for short. The doctors have identified 7 signs of Internet addiction disorder. The first sign is that a person wants more and more time on the internet. 1 hour is not enough. It's got to be 2 or 3. The second sign relates to what happens to people if they cannot get on the internet. They might dream about the internet. During these dreams, their bodies might tremble and their fingers might move as if they were typing. The third sign is that they need to use the internet to stop these things from happening to their bodies. In the same way that a few drinks will steady an alcoholic, being on the internet actually improves the way their bodies feel. Fourth, people with IAD use the internet more often and stay online longer than they intended. For example, they might go online to check email, but 3 or 4 hours later, they are still there chatting or surfing the web or whatever. Fifth, people spend a large amount of time doing things related to the internet. They might, read books about the internet, for instance, or download new internet programs, or attend internet-related conferences. The sixth sign of IAD is that people substitute online time for social activities. Frankly, they prefer communicating electronically rather than face-to-face. The seventh and last sign is that internet use becomes more important than almost anything else. Showering, schoolwork, losing a job, feeding children, even feeding yourself. They will also lie about how much time they are spending online. And they will keep using the internet even if they are punished for it. Text 2. Any of this sound familiar? Well, if so, don't panic. Some doctors discount the notion of IAD. They claim that IAD is not the same as drug addiction, because the internet is a useful tool for getting information, and also a multifaceted tool for communication. In other words, there is so much to do online that it takes a lot of time. If we think about that for a minute, it makes some sense. My wife, for example, uses the internet for just about everything. The computer for her is a communications center, a television, an office, a store, and a music player. Yet still, most people agree that it's not good to spend too much time on the internet. Everything in moderation, right? One U.S. newspaper told about a woman who was on the internet so often that her husband left her, and she forgot to buy food for her children. She also forgot to buy enough oil to heat her house. A Chinese magazine told about a teenage boy who jumped off a roof and died because he had said he wanted to be with the characters in his favorite computer game. The same magazine told stories of other children who skip school and go to internet bars all day. It said that some of them can't sleep and that their hands become numb. What can be done to help people like this? Well, doctors aren't sure. IAD is new, so they do not have much experience treating it. Some are trying programs similar to those that help people stop smoking and gambling. Ivan Goldberg, the doctor who invented the term IAD, says people who think they might be addicted to the internet should try to help themselves. First, Goldberg advises them to examine their pattern of internet use. They should know how much time they spend at the computer, and also should ask themselves how often they think about the internet. Then they should ask why they use the computer so much. Are they escaping from a problem? The third step is to make a plan to solve the problem, as opposed to just ignoring it. Finally, they should make a plan to reduce their internet use, such as trying to reduce their computer time a little bit each day. This, incidentally, raises the question of how much daily time someone should spend on the internet. Doctors say there is no perfect amount of time that is right for everyone. One doctor who has studied IAD says it's important to keep a balanced life. Time on the internet should not distract people from doing other things they like, and it should not cause people to miss time with their family and friends. Part 4. Here's more. In today's lecture, I'd like to look at the topic of food preservation and start by asking the obvious question, why do we need to preserve food? Well, apart from keeping it fresh for our daily needs, many foods, such as fruit and vegetables, are only available at certain times of the year. So, if we want to be able to eat these foods all year round, we need to preserve them. We also need to preserve food for export overseas to make sure that it doesn't perish in transit. And lastly, we need to be able to preserve food for when there are food shortages. There are a number of methods for preserving food which involve both high and low temperatures, chemicals, irradiation, and drying. Let's have a look at these in turn. In the 1870s, the French scientist Louis Pasteur showed that microorganisms in food could be destroyed by raising the temperature of the food, a process now known as pasteurization. This involves heating milk to just 65 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. A new method, the ultra-high temperature or UHT process, involves heating milk to 150 degrees Celsius for 3 seconds. The advantage of treating milk in this way is that it lasts much longer, though I tend to feel, and I'm sure many of you would agree, that taste is somewhat sacrificed in the UHT process. Tin cans were first used in the early 1800s to store and preserve food. Just as they are now, the cans were tin-plated, steel containers, and the process had the advantage of being cost-effective. Unfortunately, however, there were many early cases of food poisoning because the canning process was not fully understood at that stage. We now know the exact temperature and length of time each food needs for proper preservation, which has greatly reduced the risk of food poisoning. People living in cold climates often preserve food by burying it in the snow, and the Romans knew all about the advantages of packing food in ice. But for most people, this was not an option until the invention of the refrigerator in 1834. Today, however, refrigeration is the most important means of preserving food because the food stays fresh without needing to be treated. However, refrigeration requires an electricity supply, and unfortunately, if the power goes off, so does the food. A variety of chemicals can be added to food, and you'll find their names listed on the labels of cans and bottles. Salt is probably the oldest of all the chemical preservatives, and was used by many ancient civilizations for many years. Sugar also acts as a preservative, and is used to preserve jams in much the same way that vinegar is used to pickle foods. Chemical preservatives are effective, but they do not suit all foods, and the processes involved are time-consuming. Another method of preserving food is by drying it. Most foods are 75% to 90% water, so if you remove the water, the microorganisms simply can't survive. When food is dried, it not only lasts a long time, but it also becomes much lighter, which is a big advantage as this makes it cheap to store, though some people argue that valuable nutrients are lost in the process. Early methods for drying food involved cutting it into strips and hanging it in the sun or over fires. But there are now a number of more modern methods which involve the use of recent technology. One of these is known as roller drying, and it's a highly effective way of making dried foods from liquids, such as soup,